everyone, and welcome. Can everyone hear me okay? We seem to have a little technical difficulty with the mics, and so I'm not going to be able to use the mic, but I'm going to talk as loud as I can. So hopefully you can hear me, and if you don't, please let me know. So my name is Angela White with RBC Royal Bank, and on behalf of the Global Diversity Exchange at Ryerson, we sincerely welcome you to the Trading Abroad workshop, and hopefully you found the earlier discussions to be enlightening. And what we want to do specifically in this workshop is talk a bit more about the entrepreneur, and you will be hearing more from our panel in a minute. Before we get to that, I would like to acknowledge a few special partners in the room. Is it just talking to it? Okay. I would like to acknowledge a few special partners in the room, starting with Ratna Ahmedvar, Executive Director of the Global Diversity Exchange, and Dana Wagner, Senior Associate Researcher with GDX. Sincere thanks for partnering with RBC to sponsor this event. My Vice President of Small Business, Sarah Adams, will be here in a minute, but I also want to acknowledge that she's joining us today. So I'll be moderating our panel for today's workshop, and I feel extremely fortunate because I have a bit of a dual role today as both moderator and panelist. At some point I am going to sit and join Igor and Paul, who you'll meet shortly. So just to get things started, I know we heard a few statistics, but I do think it's worth reviewing some of the very key statistics about small and medium business, and certainly especially as it relates to trading and or exporting. Canada is home to an estimated 1.1 million businesses, and 98% of those businesses are small and medium businesses. And when we look a bit closer at these numbers, our external research tells us that these same small to medium companies represent an estimated 73% of all the businesses that export. That's extremely significant. This accounts for nearly 1/3 of the total value of Canadian exports. And when you look at the number even closer, we learn, and Kurt did mention this briefly in his comments, we learned from research that 12% of the businesses in Canada who export to markets beyond the US are actually owned by immigrants. And this compares to 7% of non-immigrant owned businesses. So this is really important, and these findings really help to support the objectives for today's workshop. I'm going to just step behind here if that's okay. Given the likelihood of immigrant entrepreneurs to trade, we wanted to talk about the essentials of trading abroad and to discuss the economic challenges and opportunities both domestically and globally to help inform your trading market selection. We also want to share some best practices on how to respond to obstacles you may face and how to prepare financially to enable your business for success. And we do want to encourage an interactive dialogue, so we will have an opportunity for questions in just a minute. And now I want to just transition over to our panel and give Igor and Paul an opportunity to introduce themselves, just to take about 5 minutes to introduce who they are, their roles, and what they'll be speaking about today. And at this point, I am going to just sit and join the panel, and I will continue to moderate from here. Thank you. So starting with Igor.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. So my name is Igor Chigrin. I'm a certified international trading professional, exporting for consulting with Global Partners. My journey in export business started 10 years ago when I joined our family business, which was the trading, cross-border trading of pharmaceuticals and medical supplies back in Russia. And at that time I was the only person in the company who spoke any English, or not level of English, I speak now, but it was enough to arrange some transactions and arrange export deals. So that's how I got in front of export in the first place. Then I noticed that other business owners in my community started to ask me questions about how do we to get a sales order for somebody with somebody overseas, or how do we arrange the trade, and that kind of question. So I started with self-funded businesses on how you get into exporting businesses. And I moved to Canada in 2009, and I decided to continue on this path. I discovered that. Sorry?
Speak into the mic.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
I don't have a lot of voice. I was so hopeful there was another. So when I came to Canada, what I discovered is that 90% of all exports are going to the United States, and the world is not explored by Canadian businesses. So I started being actively promoting other markets to them, and essentially came up with the educational program customized to each business on how to expand outside the North American market, specifically towards their products. So that's essentially where I came from and what I'm doing. Today I will be speaking more about how we find the ideal product to trade outside the markets. That's a question I get most of the time is, I wanted to get into exporting for business, how do I determine which product to pick up and which market to pick up. The other question that I get the most, and something I wanted to discuss today, is also how to find legitimate buyers or suppliers overseas. So there are also certain ways how we can do that. And we're fortunate in Canada that we have some tools that are not available in other countries when it comes to specifically finding suppliers or buyers overseas. So that's pretty much what I'm going to do today. And I'm passing it over.
Thank you for that introduction, Paul.
I'm Paul Furley. I'm Assistant Chief Economist at RDC. I've been forecasting Canadian-U.S. economies now for maybe about close to 30 years. So I've been doing most of my career. So my contribution in terms of this session is really just a macro context that you're potentially going to be operating in the next couple of years. And I'll try to focus it more in terms of small and medium enterprises, the entrepreneurs, what they might sort of want to be aware of in terms of entering the macro economic context that are be functioning within, both sort of the situation globally and as well sort of what we'll be looking at in terms of domestically, what we're sort of facing right now as sort of macroeconomic challenges. But the focus is the macro economy that you'll be operating within.
Thanks so much, Irving. Thanks for that, Paul. And I've already introduced myself a little bit earlier, Angela White with Royal Bank, but just to add a little more to what I've said, I am part of our small business strategy team at RDC. My key responsibilities is to understand the evolving needs of small businesses and to really identify ways to service those needs and to enable the growth of small business. And among our key strategic priorities, certainly something that I focus on quite significantly on a daily basis is new Canadians starting businesses in Canada. This has been and continues to be of great importance to RDC. We certainly heard key comments made by Kirk Lichak about our commitment in this particular area and our commitment to newcomers. Today I'm going to focus my comments on best practices that business owners can use to ensure that their business is in good financial shape, and that's not only necessary for those that trade, but certainly for all businesses. So that's just a little bit of an introduction from the three of us, and at this time I'd like to open up the conversation for questions, and to get us started, I've prepared a few, and so I'm going to just ask a couple of questions, but certainly don't be shy. I understand that the mics aren't working as well as they should, so I would just ask that you stand and project loudly. We're a nice, small, intimate group here, and hopefully we can have a great interactive discussion. My first question is going to go to Igor. Thinking about your own experience as an immigrant entrepreneur, and if you draw upon what you have learned as a consultant to entrepreneurs in the trade business, what advice or top tips would you give to those intending to trade globally?
I would say number one tip is to Probably. So the number one tip I would give is to identify the right product and the right market. I call it the product to market match. Let's say you're a new entrepreneur and you have vast experience in, let's say, dealing with pharmaceuticals. This may not necessarily be the right product for you to, let's say, trade between Canada and some other product, right? So this is something that we want to filter about. Besides that, what is important, and through the policies here, is the financing is important. So as a trading entrepreneur, as the entrepreneur that is exporting or importing, you've got to have the funding, you've got to have money to finance your first transaction. Well, apparently you can get the money from your transaction, from the first transaction, to finance your second transaction, and you've got to get money somewhere, whether it's your money, whether it's credit, and that's something that is apparently not easy for English entrepreneurs. And besides that, keep in mind that if you deal across different countries, ideally you should speak the same language, not necessarily in the, I don't mean just language as the mean of communication, but even if you speak English here in Canada, you still have to communicate in the fashion that is acceptable in Canada. For example, there's a huge difference between the business language, if you will, that is in Canada and the United States, or the business language that might have been in your country versus the way it is in Canada. And even how you approach people in your market, your past experience is different compared to Canada. So these are probably my top three.
Thank you very much for that feedback. Are there any follow-up questions to Igor's response? And I'm going to touch a bit in a minute about some of the things that Igor mentioned in terms of financing or getting your business ready. I will share a bit about some of what those best practices need to be when you're starting a business. And I know that Kurt briefly mentioned a business plan, but I can't underscore enough how critical it is to have one. Because it is a document that's more than just a piece of paper. It really forces you to think about how you're going to make money and forces you to think about what your business model is, and especially if you are intending to trade your products and services across borders. It does get you to think about who your market is, who your target market is, who are the customers that are actually going to pay for what it is that you have to offer, who your competition is, and what differentiates you. And so it's a critical document that I would encourage that before you even get started with any business, you certainly need to sit and think about all of those different aspects, whether you're trading or not. But thank you very much for that response. Paul, if I could turn to you, and I think there was a bit of this touched on in the earlier sessions, but we do have a fast-growing aging population in Canada compared to the birth rate, and some statistics are actually saying that seniors are projected to become more numerous than children by 2017. That's really only a couple of years away. So what does that say about the importance of immigration to this country?
It's pointing to how very important it is. I mean, this is a challenge that's not even faced by Canada. It's most industrialized economies that are looking at sort of an aging of the workforce. And the JAR, the so-called dependency ratio, is rising, which means there's fewer people, working, generating revenues of various types to fund various social programs that an increasingly large segment of the population will be drawing on. So there's this challenge that's being felt by a number of industrialized economies, and one way of addressing it is increasing immigration, and as well you want to try to skew the age structure of the population, so there is sort of a slight bias for younger type workers. There is a bit of an agenda, and nobody's really hiding behind it, because it is important that we sort of try to counter sort of this aging of the workforce. So immigration becomes very important, and it's not just because, you know, an economy is trying to be nice and do good things. There may be that element of it, but there is sort of the reality that we need the younger workers. And there's also the requirement that we integrate them as quickly as we can, and so that they're contributing right from the get-go. And this has become sort of a challenge more recently. We're having less success in terms of integrating sort of new arrivals compared to earlier waves of newcomers coming to the country. A bit of analysis, and as Kirk was suggesting, you know, the bank is trying to spend time in terms of getting at sort of, you know, how can we better sort of integrate the new arrivals, and so that they can start making a contribution fairly quickly. So it's one of those cases where it is very much sort of a win-win type situation. But for the Canadian economy as a whole, we need new arrivals, newcomers to come in to start countering what is sort of an aging of the workforce. And it's a challenge that the U.S. is confronting, though the problems aren't as great as they are for Canada, but there are bigger challenges in sort of the more established economies such as Germany, and sort of the immigration issues that they're confronting right now in some ways helps them cope with it. The question is the numbers are so great, the system is getting a bit overwhelmed. But Germany has demonstrated a preparedness to take on new immigrants because of the demographic challenges that they are facing, and in many ways are even greater than that are being encountered here in Canada. But it is sort of a challenge that needs to be met, and sort of issues like immigration policy become an important means to try to counter it.
So just to continue on a little bit more on that, Paul, Igor talked about the importance of picking the right market. When we think about what some of the economic challenges are, certainly domestically, Canada and globally, you know, what are the opportunities that there are for immigrant entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general who want to start a business, who want to trade globally? What is the impact?
Well, I mean, picking up sort of a comment that Kirk made in terms of his luncheon presentation, you know, with the drop-off in oil prices, we are being hit in part with, well, it's a negative shock in terms of lower oil prices. We're in Canada, the Canadian economy is a major producer of energy-related products. We export quite heavily energy-related products. With the drop in oil prices, this is a negative hit for Canada. It's hitting our exports, but more critically, it's negatively impacting investment activity in that sector. Dollar amounts are fairly sizable. The Canadian economy needs to offset that drag on growth. And the key area that people are looking at is exports. That they have the magnitude, the scope to offset the weakness in business investment, or more specifically, energy investment. In the current environment, with shock, the oil price shock, though it's viewed as a slight negative shock for the Canadian economy, for most other areas, this is a positive shock. It represents lower energy costs, should be supportive of most other economies. So economies such as China, this should be a supportive factor. For an economy such as India, this lower oil prices represent lower energy costs, which should be supported. Very important for the Canadian economy is this is a positive shock for the U.S. economy. This isn't a drag on growth. This is supportive of growth in the U.S. economy. And so as a result, destination for about 3/4 of our exports is to the U.S. economy. So we're looking at a growing market potentially for Canadian exports. And it's being enhanced further by a fairly significant depreciation of the Canadian dollar. So again, enhancing the competitiveness of Canadian exports in those markets. And where we are right now in terms of where the Canadian economy is, we need to sort of be trying to promote more export growth. And it's been a bit frustrating as an economist to listen to some of the early discussions when sort of the slump in oil prices first hit and sort of the emphasis being put on the negative. This is a negative shock for the Canadian economy. Well, certainly for the energy producing regions and provinces, this is clearly a negative shock. But the concern that I had at the time was an export-oriented manufacturer in Ontario. This is a positive shock. They're looking at lower energy costs. They're looking at potentially sort of a boost to U.S. growth, enhanced further by the depreciation of our currency. Now, as we pointed out by Angela and Kirk, is sort of immigrant entrepreneurs are really more focused on non-U.S. markets. The supportive factors of this shock are, again, moving in that favor. We are, hopefully we've seen some offset to what other factors that are weighing on the Chinese economy and such. But as well, we've been starting to see depreciation of the Canadian dollar relative to other currencies as well. So again, non-US markets, hopefully competitiveness has been sort of enhanced further. But in the environment that we're in right now, this should be supportive of the US economy. And so generally, it's sort of a market, I think, that should be looked at, even though that may not be traditionally where sort of the immigrant entrepreneur is looking for. There are opportunities outside of the US, but the US right now looks like sort of a major force in terms of helping to sort of generate strengthening growth globally. And then with that knock-on effect to other regions.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. What I'd like to do just for a minute before I ask my next question to Igor, I'm interested in terms of the audience here today. Can I ask for a show of hands of who's sort of part of the academic world? I know that you're with business school, but is there anyone here that is a business owner or thinking about starting a business? And so everyone else who didn't put up their hands are part of the university population. Is that fair? Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to turn to Igor for a second.
Can I just follow up on that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I think what you said is right, but I think it probably is a little bit more complicated in the sense that exporting and manufacturing takes a lot longer to generate given the present environment and the loss in oil, which puts us in a pretty vulnerable position, at least in the short to medium term. The other thing is we do really get a boost from the lower currency, but we're not the only ones who get that boost. The Mexicans, for example, beat the currencies further and further. If you look at, in spite of what Linda said this morning about Linamar investing, not that many other automotive companies are investing in Canada. So that actually strengthens your point about really having to get particularly small and medium-sized enterprises which have the potential to export to actually do something.
Yeah, I agree with your point. The response on exports just doesn't sort of occur instantaneously. But keep in mind, export growth started to pick up in the middle of 2013 and was fairly strong through most of 2014. So it's not like exporters have been flat on their back, not doing anything. We've had a pause for the first half of this year in terms of export growth. And it's left people scratching their heads in terms of what that weakness, sorry.
No, go ahead.
What that weakness is all about. So what my point is I'm just not saying magically like that with the recent depreciation of the Canadian dollar, exporters are all of a sudden going to come to light. They have been fairly strong latter part of 2013 through most of 2014, and we've got a bit of a pause right now. And because of that earlier strength, I'm not as convinced that exporters, that manufacturers are not in a position to respond. I think we were already starting to see exporters respond. What were they responding to? A weakening in the Canadian dollar earlier on as we moved away from parity, started to come down into the mid-80s, and a rebound in terms of US growth. And so with the shock that we're going through right now, to me, it's enhancing further those supportive factors, and therefore should be able to see a fairly fast sort of a bounce back in terms of export. So I hear what you're saying. I'm just not as convinced that weakness of the first part of 2015 is fundamentally what's happening. I think we've already seen some strengthening earlier on, and I think reason that maybe that can continue, given the supportive factors that were at play then, are very much continuing through the shock. Your point on autos is great. I'm actually glad that you kind of raised that, because that's one other sort of structural change that's happening right now in terms of the Canadian and Ontario economies. We are not as reliant, or we're not getting as much support from autos as we had in earlier decades. And as you're pointing out, where the investment dollars going, we're seeing a lot more going to Mexico and Southeast US, which means that even going further, the industry is not going to disappear, but it's not going to be the kind of player that it was. When you look at the numbers and you look at sort of the share of auto exports in terms of the overall basket of those goods being exported, it's clearly the case that autos aren't as significant. They have not disappeared, they're fairly sizable. What's replacing it? Food processing is fairly significant, and you're hearing that discussion more and more about the contributions of the food processing sector for the Ontario economy and the Canadian economy generally. And, you know, the argument's been made. I mean, why should that be sort of an area that we look at? Well, what do you need? You need land. Well, we've got a comparative advantage there. Maybe not so much on wages, but in land we do have a comparative advantage. Reason that food processing might be sort of an area that can not fully offset sort of weakening models, but maybe make some contribution. We're also seeing strength in areas like aerospace, seeing strength in machinery. This has been a traditionally growing area. It's not just recent, but over a number of decades, and it is of the size, of the scale. It does sort of potentially offer an offset to the weakening in the auto sector. Knowledge-based industries as well are seeing signs of growth. When you look at the data historically, it looks a bit disappointing. Problem is the fall off in black bear. You know, when you look at sort of the level of exports, they're not as strong as what they were. You know, a major sort of exporting entity that's just not playing that kind of role anymore. And so that when you look at the numbers, not as significant. But good points.
Thanks a lot for that, Paul. I'm going to just switch gears and ask Igor this question. As we read about some of the reasons given why immigrant entrepreneurs are more likely to target non-US markets, global markets, and I mentioned some of those statistics earlier. You know, we hear that language skills, having networks, and an understanding of the culture in the countries, in their country of origin, those are some of the reasons why immigrant entrepreneurs are selecting to trade and or to export or to have suppliers, you know, in the countries where they came from. So do you see this as a competitive advantage, given the work that you do consulting immigrant entrepreneurs who are trading or want to trade? What would you say about that? Is it an advantage, and if not, why not?
Well, it is an advantage, first of all, for sure. However, it's not the only critical success factor. So let's imagine an example. So you are a Spanish-speaking person born in Latin American country, Costa Rica, and you work for some company and you're trying to develop the exports of the company, or you're trying to develop your own export scene. The point is that Costa Rica may not necessarily be the right market for that. Maybe it's just a small market. Maybe Mexico is a better market, or maybe Colombia is a better market, or maybe Brazil is a better market that doesn't speak Spanish. So definitely it's a good idea to look into your home country, or the countries that speak your own language, your home language, if you will, to start with. But this is not, it shouldn't be the only direction, it shouldn't be the only destination that you're after.
Are there any questions at this point? Sure, go ahead.
I And just to interrupt, I'll ask everyone to still speak in the microphone because we're capturing it on video too, so I'll capture that.
I'm small business owner and a perfume designer.
Perfume designer?
Yes, I
Oh,
designed
okay.
10 perfume last year in France. I would like to bring it into Canada. They are high quality, but the prices in the medium range like $25 a bottle, which is 100 ml, highly concentrated. The average concentration in the market, which is 20 and to 30%. And I need to find a way to bring it into the Canadian market. And of course, maybe the export market.
Okay. So, I mean, there's not going to be a straightforward answer to how you do that. It's a process that, I mean, it's a long process. What I would start with is looking into who's selling this cosmetic products, this kind of perfume products right here in Canada, and whether they are already independent stores or they are chain stores, and try to get in touch with the suppliers and support partners of the chains. So, but again, that's not going to be the straightforward process. And that's what I can tell you just from the top.
Any marketing agency, marketing agency would be a good idea.
I can't name any, but it's really hard to answer this broad question. Like, we're gonna see exactly what we're gonna see where are you at this time. Like I can't say, for example, if this kind of product need any certification in Canada, because it's like what type of cosmetic product what type of cosmetic products you have, how to classify that, whether it falls under any regulated areas in Canada. So that's also important.
My business is industrial automation, but maybe my question is general. I would like to know which kind of facilities we may get from government or from financial institutions or somewhere to make marketing in other countries, like exhibitions, supporting exhibitions, or maybe supported by the Chamber of Commerce of Canada and the related country, and then maybe other facilities, commercial section of the Canada or something, anything else, maybe presenting seminars or finding requested contact person in other countries.
So if I wouldn't mind just sort of restating to make sure I understand your question. So are you asking how you market your...
No, I mean if we need some supports, politically, financially, or maybe some offices may provide some supports in these countries. How you do that, then how we can get it. For example, maybe in some countries in the Middle East there is some offices. In other countries are doing that. For example, German Chamber of Commerce is doing that. And then maybe we would like to participate in an oil and gas exhibition trade fair in Middle East or in UAE. That how can we get financial support or something else?
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, I could probably answer that. There's a government funding program that is available here in Ontario for businesses that employ more than 5 employees, and they go to the trade show or they go to the government trade mission outside the country. They can get back 50% of the costs. So 50%, which includes the cost of participation, the cost of airfare, some portion of accommodation, translation,
But must be 5%.
must be 5 employees. So that's speaking about financial side. Besides that, the direct financial system, there are other services such as trade commissioning. That's number one. If you are exporting company, that's number one direction to go is Canadian Trade Commissioner service. So these are the people that are part of foreign affairs, and they have representatives pretty much across the world that can help you to find the right contacts.
Yeah, much more detailed, much more detailed. The case is that we are entrepreneur, and having 5 employees is the next. And then the fourth step, we should go sit in a booth, an exhibition, see what's around. And that needs also support. Maybe you go in the booth and sit and some commercial session, some help desk, or some people from Canada help us to find right partner. Maybe check their credit by the government, maybe help us to make communication, or maybe some help us in financial expenses. That means that for a small, we are talking about the entrepreneurs, small startup.
Well, there's nothing really from a financial standpoint. Very important development. But again, a trade commission service, for example, that provides some sort of matchmaking, if you will. That service is not limited to how many employees you have. It's available if you're one person.
It's getting a little bit outside my area, and I'll yield to Igor, but I mean, Expert Development Corporation, they have sort of some facility as well in transit. Expert Development Corporation, EDC.
Well, EDC is primarily financial institutions, so we don't have to forget that. So, first of all, they're only focusing on export, but their insurance side and their financing side of the trade transaction is way stronger than their ability and their appetite for much more.
Thank you.
My question is, I got a license from the government
To import?
to import. I've been importing some sandals made from skin skins or animals, and I've been importing bags of these made from these.
Do you mind if I ask this to speak a little bit louder?
I have been importing sandals made from skins of animals, and some bags of babies made from pigs. And I'm in plan of bringing honey back home, made from come from directly pigs. Then I want to register my company also, my company name. And I don't know the procedure, and I don't have too much money, and I'm looking to get a loan so that I can include on my items, and the money is right by the government stuff.
Thank you for your question. So, so are you saying you're looking to register your business in Canada, so you've not done that yet?
We are registering the name for my business.
You do have a name, or you?
I have a name and I have a license.
You have the name and the license, and now you're ready to get started and to open up your business relationship. Well, one of the first things you have to do is walk into an RBC room. Have you done that yet? And I'm actually being serious. So you have taken one of the key first steps, right, to get your business license, and you have a business name. And I'll ask another question before I move on. Do you have a business plan?
Yeah, I have a business.
You have a business plan, so you're ahead of the game. And so one of the things that you likely need to do, in all honesty, is sit with your banking account manager, and that person would take you through the process of opening a business account. Have you done that yet? It sounds like. And some of the things that you would think about when you think about opening your business account is the type of business that you want to have. And you have options of opening your business as a sole proprietorship. You have options of opening your business as a corporation, which has some tax benefits. You have options of opening a business as a partnership, if you in fact do have a partner. And so sitting with someone in the bank, and certainly at RBC, we would talk with you a little bit more about the different benefits to each of these types of business structures, and make sure we get you started with the right operating account, so that that then becomes the account that you use to manage and run your business. So that would be a starting point. Does that answer your question? I can certainly go further in terms of additional things that you would potentially need to look at beyond just opening a business account. We would want to understand more about the type of business you have, how much your cash needs are on a monthly basis, what your operating expenses are expected to be, and then from there we can determine what the right kind of financing might be for you, whether it's a business credit card or line of credit or term financing, depending on if you need to purchase equipment or buy property. That would determine the type of financing that you would need. So we'd love to have that conversation with you, and after this discussion, we would be more than happy to exchange contact information and perhaps get you talking to someone. Are there any other questions? Sure.
Just I want to know, we set up, the facilities which you are offering to the entrepreneur farmers.
Yes.
Are you trying to guide your clients to get some funds or grant from the government, which is available and it's unknown, especially for new immigrants? Are you planning, or do you have any kind of program to help them to get those funds as well?
I will answer that question, and at this point I do want to, as a courtesy, mention that Sarah Adams has joined us and is the VP of Small Business. And certainly, Sarah, feel free to add any comments. But we do offer the Canada Small Business Financing Loan at RBC. Again, part of it is sitting down and discussing what type of business you are running. And that will determine the best type of financing for you. And certainly, whether you are an immigrant entrepreneur or born Canadian entrepreneur, we do have a range of types of financing to help you service your business or help you get your sort of manage the day-to-day operations of your business. So yes to the Canada Small Business Financing Loan, but yes as well to other types of term loans. If you're purchasing property, as I mentioned before, if you're purchasing equipment, if you need a line of credit, which most businesses will, just to sort of manage the day-to-day operations of their business and to purchase operating expenses, we can help you with that. Does that answer your question? Or are you looking for some?
Yeah, no, I know that you are offering such a business. This is kind of financing.
Right.
But there is some grant and fund which is provided by even the provincial government or which is it's not here for the entrepreneur. They can if you do have some kind of program to offer it to the people who likes to invest in Canada, you may be able to help them to improve the export of Canada, because it's as the gentleman said, it's a very good sign right now for Canada to increase their export.
So thank you for clarifying your question, and I am familiar with the fact that the Canadian government has a range of different types of programs for people that immigrate here, whether you're immigrating here as an investor or you have a skilled visa or work permit. And we've actually recently formed a partnership with NACO. I don't know how familiar you are with them, and they are an angel investor group or have access to angel investors that can help businesses who require startup financing or investment, so that first round of funding. And so I'd be more than happy to talk with you a bit about that program. And there's an upcoming conference that we will be partnering with NACO on in October, where we'll talk a little bit more about that new relationship or partnership with RBC. And one of the things we want to do to activate that program is actually enable our sales advisors in the branches to be aware of the program, to be aware of the resources that we now have access to as being part of or having that relationship with NACO. And quite frankly, in cases where we aren't able to offer financing based on whatever the reasons may be, it's great to now have that network of resources that we'll be able to refer our clients to get that startup VC type of funding. So we're really excited about that, and I'd be more than happy to talk with you more about that opportunity. I appreciate the question.
Hi, thank you for joining us. So my question was just based on the facts that you stated earlier. It was that 95% of Canadian businesses, 98% is small to medium. Do you, and this is just a general question to the whole panel, believe that Canada might be too dependent on small to medium businesses? And just a follow-up question to that is, what do you think the barriers are for small to medium businesses to transition to essentially large businesses?
Those are great questions, and Paul may have an answer, and I certainly do. So the short answer for me is no, I don't think we're too dependent on small and medium businesses, and in fact, it doesn't look that different in the United States either. I mean, most large economies tend to have a larger percent of smaller businesses, and you would find typically just 8 to 10% are commercial businesses. But I will come back to your second question, and Paul, I think maybe you might want to add as well.
Well, I just temper that statistic you cited, which is correct in terms of number of businesses that are classified as SMEs. But when you look at number of employees, it's not as skewed. I mean, the large firms still dominate, I know they're only 2% of the number of firms the employee. I don't have the number on the top of my head, but it's much larger. And so as a result, it tempers this idea that it's just dominated by SMEs. When you have a number of employees, it's a bit more balanced. There is an issue, though, that there's some concern that we don't graduate enough small businesses to medium and then grow them further. So there is some concern as an economy as a whole.